Hi guys, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good, good, good. I recognise your face, I think.
Alan Abington.
Alan, of course I do. How are you, Alan? Lovely to see you, my friend.
Well,
Thank you, buddy. Great to see you. So listen, we were just going to chat about salmon fishing today, and we're going to chat about a slightly different approach than the classic salmon fishing we were talking about earlier, and how that at the moment there was plenty of water in the rivers, that the primarily, although we're going back to the days of the 18-foot rods, that most people at the moment will be tackling the salmon river with a 14 or a 15 footer. As this water drops away and the water gets lower and the fish slow down a wee bit, I find certainly one of the most productive tactics and techniques is to start to scale everything down with reference to the kit that we use. Now obviously distance can be an issue, but that said, one of the issues that people have, I think, who have grown up salmon fishing, coming from a background where everybody's using huge big salmon rods, is that I like low water. I like it. I think I worked as a guide for a long time. I started as a gillie when I was 17 years old on the west coast of Scotland, and I have guided and hosted trips, and from the Patagonia to Alaska to Iceland, pretty much anywhere where there's water where I can try and throw a fish at, I've kind of been. And one of the things that's allowed me to do is to kind of watch and learn from some of the best guides on the planet who haven't been restricted, in inverted commas, by classic salmon fishing. I love all the history around salmon fishing. I love swinging flies. I love the feeling of blasting out a big cast and that big deep bend you get in a spey rod and throwing long distances. It's lovely. I have to say, I like catching fish even more than I like casting for them. And as a qualified casting instructor, I like casting. But I find one of the things I've picked up while I've been moving around the world is that the first question people ask, is there any water? Has it rained? The first question you should be asking is, are there any fish? If there's fish, we're in the game straight off. One of the problems with, I think, with throwing the big rods around at ranges, and you'll know this on the big waters like the Tay, is that they are quite daunting, that you just feel like you are launching casts into the wide blue yonder, swinging flies round, and in most people's minds, the average mindset of a salmon fisher, unfortunately, is that once that fly has gone out somewhere near its intended target, they tend to adopt the I'm a little teapot pose, the rod comes down by the side, the fly swings round, they probably put a mend in at 45 degrees, and then they take a step downstream. Then they throw another cast, they throw a mend upstream for no apparent reason, they adopt the I'm a little teapot pose, and they let the fly around, and eventually something will make a mistake. I just have the attention span of a gnat, so I need to be working and trying to catch fish at all times. So one of the things we're going to talk about today is how we can, even on the big rods, but how we can be a little bit more proactive about how that fly swings round and when to change your approach. There's nothing crazy complicated about any of this. It helps by scaling down with the gear tremendously as well. So let's take a classic scenario now where, let's fast forward 2 or 3 weeks, the water drops away. We know we've probably had the biggest run of fish that's going to come into the river all year, these summer salmon, early summer salmon, on top of the spring fish which are populating the water already. Then as the water shrinks, then the fish will be easier to locate, so they will, at certain times of the day, and if it's cloudy like this, concentrate their efforts, concentrate their time in the fast streamy water right at the neck of the pool and in the tail of the pool, where they can sit comfortably without experiencing too much threat and have plenty of oxygen going over the top of them. I watched a couple of guys, I guide on a piece of water now as well as run guideline fly fishing, guideline fly fishing, which I will do until the end of August when I officially retire after 12 years at the helm, and I go back to guiding full time. I watched some of the local rods coming on our piece of water, and they're lovely guys. I fished all over the world with them, fished in Argentina with them a couple of years ago. and they really feel unsure or unconfident in using anything other than a 14-foot rod. The problem we've got on my bit of the Eden, which is full of fish at the moment, and we're doing very well catching them, the guys who are turning up with the big salmon rods, there's just no bueno at all. Because if they get to a pool and they have their 14-foot salmon rod, they then have, let's say they've got an integrated line with a head of 40 to 50 feet, and then they have so they're now 65 feet with the rod away from where they're stood. Then they've got a tip on the end, then they've got a leader on the end, and then they've got the fly. Right? Now, I know those guys really well, super cool guys. They know they've got to start shorter. They know that the fish will be in the oxygenated water, but it's very, very difficult when you've got a 14-foot salmon rod and a rod and a fly line that's not going to bend. That fly rod's not going to bend until you've got 3/4 of that head out efficiently before that fly starts to swing. They are having to stand either so far back up the pool they can't control the fly, or they're ignoring or not fishing correctly the water from our feet to where our friend with the cameraman with the hardy flag is. Right? Just because the head's too long. Okay, so one of the things I catch, pretty much barring 3 of the 28 springers we've landed on our bit, have all come on these smaller rods, because our water is, it's not an overly small river. I would suggest the Eden would be from here to, at its widest, the Sims sign. Most of it we're fishing with the smaller rods would be from here to the bollards just in front of us, and some of the fish we've been catching this year literally been from me to you guys. They're that close, right? But if you don't go down with the right approach, if you haven't got the right kit, you are putting yourself at a massive disservice before the flies even hit the water. I learnt this the hard way because I used to fish up in Scotland. When my dad, when I was a wee kid, my dad used to have a beat on the River Findorn, and Dad and I kind of learnt together a little bit salmon fishing. We came from a trout fishing background. We were fishing on the reservoirs. I was catching a few fish on the river. We were going up to Dunerne, Daltra, Mini Daltra, beautiful bits of water on the River Findorn. We could see all the fish slopping around in the pools certain times of the day. We'd catch an odd un, almost like fishing, like we were pulling flies back in a lake, and occasionally you get one to chase. I got so bored as a young teenager, I set up my trout rod one day and I didn't have any trout flies with me, but I found the smallest flies my dad had in his box. He had a black pennel on a gold hook, believe it or not, but it was on like a size 14 double, and I found a little outpoint treble size 16, and I just thought I'd chuck those 2 on. I think we'd probably been rowing or something, as my dad used to at that age, because I was just kind of a bit of a naughty teenager at times. And I remember going to the top of a pool called Kennel, Upper Kennel. It was a fast streamy bit of water, and I thought I'll just try there for trout. Second cast, the girls came up and rolled on the black pennel. Didn't take, was kind of shocked and surprised. And I kind of crept down another few feet, cast out again, the fly came round, and I hooked a grills. And I was like, oh. We've been kind of blasting cast very badly a long way down there. So once I got into that mindset of treating these things like trout in low water, and also that married so well into all the places I've been and fished in Iceland and guided and hosted trips in Iceland, in Chile, in Patagonia, all these places, a lot of the fish, even big fish, big king salmon at times in Patagonia now, that we catch on very, very short casts that you would completely miss if you just went down with a big rod and started enjoying the whole process of spey casting. You've kind of stood on top of the fish. You know, I don't know how many of you fish down and you're walking down a run, at the top of the run you get into the water, you're working your head out, you're pulling the line off, and all of a sudden a fish crashes there right opposite you. That's you've pushed that fish out. Yeah, that fish was catchable if you'd have started where this cone is and stayed out the way and just thrown a nice little short cast. But I say, it's very difficult to do on these big sticks. So One of the things that's happened over the course of the years, everybody, it doesn't matter whether you're a trout fisher, you'll have seen people going from 9'5" weights to 9'4" weights to 9'3" weights, then longer 5 weights. The reservoir guys have gone from 8 weights to 7 weights to 6 weights. Salmon fishers have come down in line size and rod length. Like we were saying, that's brilliant because it's easier on the shoulders, right? Easier to cast, the line technology is better. My first port of call is I will, generally speaking in my river, a big rod for me in my river, probably, I'm fishing 8-9, 13-9, 8-9, that kind of line class, maybe 9-10, absolute max for me. Once the water starts dropping, I then drop onto one of the switch rods, and this is a 11'6", and it's got a 7/8 rating on it. It's got a little short shooting head. So if I can kind of, let's say that this cone here is my first part of the target, I don't mind starting, even with the switch rod, my first few casts just with an overhead cast, because I haven't got enough line here even to make, I can kind of flick it out there, but I'm literally making this cast as short and as close to me as humanly possible, because honestly the amount of fish I've caught right under my feet consistently over the years, and then slowly but surely I will work out. And my dad always used to say, once we started catching fish, remember that a fish is only about, on average, a salmon that long. So I'm really being, every time I extend the line, I'm extending about that much to start off with, just at the top of the run, in this well oxygenated water. So when this water drops in, you're going to get fish packed into these areas, yeah? And I will just slowly move myself down the pool, making sure I've covered that water that's close in, and then I can then start to make a spay cast across the flow, extending this line slowly but surely as I go. But one of the crazy things I've seen over the years guiding around the world is that this is there's so much fun to cast these shooting heads, especially, you know, these short shooting heads, that you want to get that line from a casting perspective just outside the rod tip, somewhere around there, before the rod starts to feel great. Then everybody makes a cast and the line goes firing out over the water, and then they go, fantastic, and they go, ja, whilst walking down. Now, I'm not saying by any stretch of imagination that every inch wants to be covered at snail's pace, because there's nothing more frustrating than somebody coming down behind you going, it's okay if I fish through? Kind of, and one of the things I always used to, I kind of cottoned onto, you used to say to people when you were guiding, just take a step downstream, keep moving, take a step, so like a big step, just like 3 steps. So you want to move through quickly, but you need to cover this water accurately. Once then that line is kind of outside the rod tip, and I've extended to my comfortable distance, and when I say comfortable distance, a distance which is consistently and cleanly turning over, because ideally from a casting perspective, especially if it's windy like today, I don't want so much line out that I am left with a lot of this running line constantly just blowing around in and around my reel. It gets around the back of the rod handle, around the back of the reel. It's an absolute mess. It always tangles up here, especially as I spent, I don't know how many, I've probably spent now, I don't know, 30 weeks in Patagonia for sea trout. And now it can be super windy in Patagonia. This would be a lovely calm day in Patagonia. It would be absolutely delightful. It's like the windiest place on the planet. So much so that sometimes you've got your car, you've got your guides park the car. You imagine this is the truck. You've got to make sure, if you're a guide, you park that truck into the wind. Because if you park it this way, and the client's all excited about getting down to his favourite pool, he whaps the door open, literally the wind can be so strong, it will either, well, it'll certainly bend the door round, which is instant sackable offence, and I have seen him almost rip the doors off. That does mean kind of levering the door out to get the client out can be a little bit difficult. So anything left constantly here flapping around doesn't want to be there. Because also when you make a cast and that line then pops against the reel, especially if it's breezy, it helps turn that fly over. Whereas most people feel that and then immediately go, oh, more. So it doesn't go any further a lot of the time. Occasionally it does, then they pour more off. Why is that important? Well, I know that if the fly doesn't land perfectly, listen, every fly cast that hits the water has got potential, even the really, 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 really bad ones. But you have more potential in the better casts, and the better casts for me are not ones that have gone necessarily a long way. It's one where that leader and the fly has turned over cleanly and consistently. And having that little pop against the reel there is super important. So it just boop. So you know then, as soon as that fly hits the water, yeah, it's fishing. Because the amount of fish, and I've caught fish this season, and caught fish with clients this season, that fly has hit the water, within a second of it swinging, I can see a fish has left the bottom and is moving on that fly. If that fly is not turning over cleanly and it's just tumbling its way down, and all of a sudden it hooks up in the current, you've lost potentially some of the most important part of your swing. Especially coming back to this low water technique where, you know, at the neck of a pool, your fly needs to be fishing consistent. Let's say that's the very neck of a small stream and the grass there. If that's landing in a tumbled heap, it's not pulling tight till here. It's not pulling tight till here. But if it's jap, jap, jap. So turnover is crucially important. To make this turnover easier, one thing I do, which I think a lot of salmon fishing don't do, having worked for a Scandinavian company for 10-12 years, is that they drill this into you like most things, is I always taper my leader down. I know that salmon fishermen historically, I can think of my dad on the Findon all those years ago with just like maybe 10 feet of 12-pound brown Maxima with a big loop on the end, just kind of level all the way through. And then, you know, if the water came up, we'd put a big tube on. We didn't really, I guess there was wet cell 2 lines about then, probably definitely just about was then. But outside of that, we had a poly line. There was no poly leaders, there was no fluorocarbon, kind of brown Maxima. But obviously, thinking back, if you've got 12, 15-pound brown Maxima and a 2.5-inch copper Willy gun, it's no surprise that that thing does not want to come out of the water very often. Occasionally, it will go in a random direction where you want to. A tapered leader, when you are fishing in low water conditions for fish, where presentation is key, is an absolute must for me. Fluorocarbon versus mono. I'm from Yorkshire originally, so we don't like spending money where I can on fluorocarbon, and it's very expensive. But that does have some advantages in so much that it's stiffer, so it helps turnover. It sinks, which if you are, unless you're fishing a ripple hitch or you necessarily want to be keeping your fly in that top, you know, either on the surface or just under. So most of the time I'm happy fishing mono, to be honest with you. But a taper, now you can buy these tapered leaders and then put a ring on and put a tippet on. And if you're unsure what breaking strain to put on, the easiest test is if you get a salmon fly and you put that onto your tippet, if that salmon fly is stood up, like straight up, your tippet is too stiff because you want some movement in that fly. If you are putting a fly on and you've gone too light on the tippet and that fly just flops down there, turning that over is not going to end well. Yeah, so a taper, just to transfer this energy from the end of this fly line, which has a taper in anyway, down this loop here to that point is super important. I promise you, everybody, the people, really good salmon fishermen I've taken around the world, you know, and when we did fish in Russia, I spent quite a bit of time in Russia, and I spent so much time in boats with people who could not get the max tube on the Ponoy, which is their famous fly out there. out of the water, or it would kind of flip every now and again. It would just flip one side or the other, didn't quite turn over. Either tapering it down makes a massive difference. Once you've got that cracked, I put a lot of emphasis into how I fish the fly. So historically, those salmon fishers that are here listening now will know that, let's say the current, for argument's sake, is going from left to right. So I'm on the right hand bank here. Historically, salmon fishers would put their fly across the river, boom, there. The fly would then swing round as I'm a little teapot position, maybe put a mend in for no apparent reason, and then just repeat. If that's working, I'm doing it. But generally speaking, one of the old adages I've always stuck to is that probably 90% of fish are caught by 10% of the fishermen. Trout fishing, salmon fishing, that's the only thing that I know. Saltwater fishing, I know. Outside of fly fishing, I don't. I'm sure it's the same in other forms of fishing. So my thing was, when I was growing up, why I wanted to do my casting lessons, I just wanted to catch more fish. So I started studying what this 10% were doing. This 10%, and I would say almost 100% correct now to this day. Some of the people on my pro team with Guideline, Con and David on the Tay at Taymount, Paul Davison down on the Eden, all of them who fish for salmon, generally speaking, have the same. Their presentation of their fly and their delivery isn't all about distance, it's about turnover. They concentrate on the speed at which the fly is moving across the current. They're constantly thinking of and watching the shape of that swing on the water. Most of the amount of people I just say, I improve the salmon fishing so quickly once they've got the casting sorted. I just wanted to watch the speed that fly line's coming around in the flow. Just be conscious of it. Okay, now if we put a downstream mend, instead of your, almost like my dad's nervous tick where I always used to go at 45 down to slow it down, can you see how that speeds that fly up a little bit? Can you see if we put a cast, if we put that mend in upstream, we can get that fly to slow down and hover. Being focused on that swing at all times, after the presentation, yeah, regardless of the distance, yeah, will make a massive difference. Because if you watch consistently, that you will start to notice that you'll start to see flashes under the end of your fly line, under the end of your leader. Do you know what I mean? You'll see little visual clues. You'll start to see and start to read the water a lot better. One of the biggest problems I have with people who fish the Tay is that, and I had it myself when I first fished it, it's massive. It's not as big as the Ponoy or some of the places I fished in Russia, but you look at it for the first time and you're like, you feel like you've wound up your best cast ever, and the perspective just gets to you and it looks like you've thrown it 15 feet. Sometime, I'm sure Procky was saying about from a trout fishing perspective, for me the same with the salmon job, just sometimes studying the flows, what you can cover with your ability and where you think the fish will be based on your own experience or the experience of the gillies, and then work those areas cleanly and consistently with great presentation. But the other thing all these people do, and I always do, is that I don't think, unless I'm grabbing probably my vape out of my pocket, I ever make a salmon fly just swing on its own. I'm always moving it to a greater or lesser degree. I'm always doing something with it. Either I'm doing the Con from Taymount little twitch, where he's just kind of jobbing his rod tip up and down. I'm either figure of eighting this back in constantly. There's one technique which we use a lot in Argentina, which is fantastic as well. If you can imagine, we've got a flow where the Scandinavians will pull this back, the Scandi shuffle, they'll introduce speed into the fly as it's kind of coming round in the flow, so that fly is moving erratically, but also it's got a bit of weight to it, it's kind of sinking and drawing through the water. I like to do a variation of that, which I think is which is this kind of sink and draw technique, where I'm just I've got my finger on here, and as if I've got enough pace, I'm pulling it and letting it slide back, and pulling it and slide back. Then I might mix that up with a figure of 8. I'll give you a classic example of this. There was I was teaching. I'm old, so I don't understand who YouTubers are, but apparently there was some. Have you heard of? You might know. Have you heard of? They're called Friends at Work. So one of them was on like Strictly, another one's a singer. They do this thing where they just do different activities. It's a bit strange. It's like they're basically making a fortune, so people can sit in front of a computer and watch them do things that they could be out there doing themselves. But hey ho, they seem like super nice guys. But we got a couple of them. I had a couple of them this week fishing on the river, and we were covering the tail of this pool. And you can imagine, on a salmon pool, one of the best and most fun places to fish for me is these classic V's where the water speeds up, goes into like a smooth chute before it breaks into some streamy water below. And the guy, it's not a long cast where we were, that's right at our bank. And this guy from the famous YouTuber dude was covering the water perfectly, but he was just kind of forgetting to move the fly. So what we're going to do, we covered it beautifully. I was pretty sure that there would be a fish there because there were plenty of fish about. It was on this line. I didn't have a tip on. It was a longish leader, even though the water was big, because I knew the water was fairly shallow there. And I just got him to draw the fly, just one big long strip, just as it was coming round. Yeah, and as it came round and he made that long strip, the fly must have came pretty close to the surface. And I noticed there was a fish following. It was a bow wave started behind the fly. So I got him to strip it again, and it came a bit, and then the bow wave lifted a little, and I said, now fast, you've got to keep that going faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. And as it was, the fish took and he struck and it all went horribly wrong. But that fly would have swung, the same fly would have swung over that one fish 20, 30 times. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying that if all of us invariably now are fishing over fish which have been caught multiple times by the end of the season, that's just a fact. I used to work on and take people to a river in Iceland where the number of rod caught salmon was double pretty much the number of fish that are actually running the river. That's because obviously we're practicing catch and release, so the fish are going back in. If you are following your mates down, especially if they're as good a fisher as my mates, then, and you're doing the same thing, they ain't going to leave anything for you. So regardless of who you are following down the river, if they are just doing this 45 degree with a swing, 45 degree with a swing, 45 degree with a swing, and it's not working, the definition of insanity really is to continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. You are seeing fish, if you know there are fish in the beat, if you are confident you are covering those fish, then just changing your angle, introducing a bit of speed. I think speed, depth and presentation way outweigh for me all the beautiful flies in there. Some of them are ours from Guideline, which is good because my children must eat, and we have some lovely flies. We all have our own favourite flies, but I'm pretty confident if I could get the shape, I'm not really that fussed about the colour. Weight and the profile, the depth and the speed is more, when people think they're making a change because things aren't working and they go from like a silver stoat's tail with jungle cock cheeks to a willy gun for exactly the same size, or a change for me is not going from one pattern in one size to another pattern in the same size. Or my fly box, and I'm quite happy to show you my fly box, is pretty horrendous. I've got things that are literally this size, tiny, tiny, tiny micro tubes. I have things that are this big. I have very little in that kind of middle ground because everybody's using it and the fish get used to seeing it. I want that shock factor as well. I want the fish to suddenly think there's something I haven't seen before. Do you know what I mean? Fish in a way that I haven't seen it before. I mean, I'm fortunate in so much that there's a couple of pools in the summer on the Eden where I fish. Beautiful private piece of water. And we're at the confluence between two streams as well. So it's a great holding spot. We've already got way more fish than we normally would have at this time of year, and there's more coming, which is why when I leave you, ladies and gentlemen, I will be in the car, ready to rock and roll. My waders and my boots are in the back of the car as well. I can't see them yet. We have seen them, but there are places where I can see these fish, right? And we've been sight fishing for them. I've maybe had 22 fish with clients this year that we've sight fished, which is awesome, because like Iceland is a fantastic place to do that, where you can physically see how these fish are responding to your flies, and then you can see that sometimes a fish will, if you just swing that fly super smoothly, a fish will just, with a 45 degree, it'll come up and take the fly. You can then take the same pattern, throw it square, or strip it at not necessarily a hugely different angle, but a big enough change, and from the same fish that you have been repeatedly covering that looks like it's gone into some kind of coma, which it will not emerge from until November, when it's time to get all primeval and make babies, will all of a sudden react like it's just been it's been electrocuted and somebody's fired it out of a gun towards your fly. Easier when you can see them, but the same principle. You know, we were talking about Con O'Day on the Tay. Con for me is like, he is constantly changing and chopping and changing. Speed, his retrieve, of course, Con knows every pebble on the bottom of that river, I understand that, but Con also knows that if he fishes down the same way, consistently, it's not working, and there's fish in the beat. That's the beauty of seeing them on the Eden. It's really cool to see the reaction. So, as the water continues to drop, then this shooting head, what I might do is I might extend that leader, and a long leader for me would be between, depends on the size of the water and the size of the fly, but very rarely will I use a leader which is less than 12 feet. Very rarely. The only time I would probably go around that 12 feet, maybe even shorter, would be if I was fishing a riffle hitch. Then I definitely don't want fluorocarbon. I just want a short piece of nylon so that fly's zipping about on the surface. Outside of that, I'm normally fishing between 15 and 22, 23 feet. I want that fly as far away from this thick shooting head fly line as humanly possible. As long as I can turn it over, and that might adjust with the wind. If I was throwing this into the wind, I would definitely cut this back today. I don't want, because I'd rather have the presentation in a shorter leader than sacrifice that. I will still use this outfit because it has this running line attached on this shooting head. I will still use this and replace this floating line with one of the sinking shooting heads, which works fine and dandy. Some of you who don't know salmon fishing will be wondering why I've got this rather than the coated stuff attached to the... Are you a salmon fisher as well? So, you're a trout fisher? Yeah. So you know the coated running line on the back of a weight forward line? Normally, you can get shooting line that is coated. This is like this is an oval mono line. So there's reasons behind it and reasons why you don't use it. The coated stuff, like on the trout lines, is more tactile. So if you're moving it, you can feel it in your fingers. For me, it also actually it slows the fly line down a little bit, which can help turn the fly over quite nicely, especially at range. If I'm fishing early season and I'm fishing a lot of sinking lines and heavy flies, I love this stuff. I love this stuff because, for me, daft as it sounds, you would think in the windiest place in the world in Argentina that would tangle more than the coated stuff. It doesn't. The coated stuff drives me absolutely nutty. Not to say this doesn't tangle, but it tangles less. The thing I like about this is that there's almost, I think there's like 3% stretch in it. So I can feel every single tick. If I can't visually see the fish taken, then if I'm figure of eighting back, which I'm constantly doing, I have a pal of mine who just does the roly-poly thing all the time. I mean, which is quite cool because it stops you striking, because you just have to keep roly-polying back. I kind of figure of eight a lot. Anything that gets its mouth wrapped round a sharp hook, you generally feel on this this running line, this mono running line. Horses for courses. If you're just starting the coated stuff, a little bit more user friendly. So as we kind of get into July and August, and that rod becomes a little ungainly, we do have, for the single-handed fishers amongst us, and I was saying to some of the guys earlier, in fact I've got 2 people coming this week, no salmon fishing experience. I said, oh, what's your experience? Oh, we've done a bit of river fishing and we do quite a bit of lake fishing. It's like, oh, perfect. It's just perfect. It's perfect because the water's going to be dropping in. We will either be on 10-foot 7 weights and ripple hitching or pulling little flies across the surface, or we will be on one of these, which are a kind of a longer, I mean, I guess the Americans would call these trout spay. We call these, the Scandinavians call these ultralight Scandi. I have to get Scandi in there somewhere, I guess. But basically, this is an 11-foot rod. With this one's rated, that one's rated for 7. That's the one I fish at home mainly. This one's, and in Argentina, this one's an 11-foot 8 weight. Now, whereas that is a salmon 8 weight, there's a huge difference in the weight of a salmon line and a trout line, even though the number stays the same. Nothing like confusing people with trout lines and salmon lines and gram weightings and grain weightings. This is, though, like we were saying about your trout line, this is a coated running line. This is a Guideline Bullet. It's Iceland's best-selling fly-line single line salmon fish. It's probably one of the most important lines Guideline I've ever had in the race. It's short head. It's easy to see where it is. It loads up super quick. So this now becomes, when that starts to feel like the 15-footer, this really comes into its own. So this is 11 feet long. So it's a little longer than your regular 10-foot rod that you would fish normally for sea trout and salmon. We can put a little shooting head on it there, which I have done, like a micro version of that, which comes with tips as well. But this, just with the straight floater, is brilliant for me. Why is it 11 foot long? Well, we can use it like a little double hander if needs be. So if I'm really stuck for room and space, so let's say we are casting that way and I want to form a D loop here, I haven't got room to make an overhead cast, I can be really precise as to where I position that D loop. I can be up to here in water, so it works like a little double hander. The presentation is absolutely perfect, but then when I want to open my shoulders a little bit, where I've got a little bit of room, then we can use it just as a single hander. Now, being 11 feet long, it isn't a rod that I would use out of a boat, say, where I'm constantly casting it backwards and forwards. So 11 feet is quite a bit of leverage, but it's still perfectly comfortable to be able to kind of throw super nice loops effortlessly. And also having this single hand, being able to use it as a single hander, if for instance I'm going into a wind, I can, if needs be, introduce more line speed as a haul on the way forward. Put that line out, so it's just a really, every now and again, like a rod comes along, you pick it up and you go, oh yeah, I know I can catch fish on this rod. I've been waiting for this. It's so much fun. This is like the ultimate fun stick for me. I do so much damage on this thing. It's just absolutely fantastic. Rio do one exactly the same. I think the Simon and Jim call theirs the trout spay. Same principle, most companies are doing them. They actually started in trout spay, so we do one 10 foot 6 for a 5, 10 foot 6 for a 6, which are kind of streamer pulling trout rods for rivers and things. But actually they're finding a real home in Argentina and in Iceland, in Scotland. I mean, this on the Findon, I've had this when there were that many fish and me and my dad were fishing the Findon. Good Lord. I mean, we were catching a lot of fish then because there were a lot of fish, but you'd light the place up now. Then I used to use a 10 foot 6 weight, but this 11 feet cool as well from a single landing perspective in low water, because you can manage this line. You know, if you're fishing like in fast runs and stuff, you've got a little bit more line control. And then heaven forbid you go to the dark art and you are putting this upstream over the top of the fish and you are nymph fishing for them, then it almost acts like a Euro nymphing rod as well. So it's a really cool set. It's a really cool setup. Now listen guys, I'm going to show you as well just some of my devilish flies which will be employed on Cumbrian salmon this evening. Let me show you. So far we've got the thing, tapering this leader is like super important. Super important. I can't stress that enough. Presentation, making sure that you are not casting beyond your ability, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, I just mean that every cast has got potential, it's just the ones that land straight have got way more potential and better. I remember fishing in, took a group to, a long time ago, to the Copper River in British Columbia. We were fishing for sea trout. I had a lovely guy and he was casting away, and the steelhead have a reputation of being a fish of 1,000 casts. So by day 4, I got one of my well-to-do clients had said to Wally Fates, the lodge owner, he said, Wally, he said, I'm sure I've done way over 1,000 casts now and I've still got no steelhead. And Wally Fates went, yeah, but that's 1,000 good casts. Just as he made another cast and he went, 15. And he was like, right, okay. So the presentation needs to be absolutely spot on. Always move your fly for me, to a lesser or greater degree. It just keeps me and my overactive brain switched on. I find if I go to, with the exception of Arndilly, which I just love, I might swing a pool because it's just so beautiful, but on the Tay, on big rivers, on some of the big steelhead rivers I've fished, it's like if I'm not doing something, I'm casting, but I'm not really fishing. I've switched off. I'm just going and occasionally you'll get this jolt back into reality. I know if I'm fishing at my best, I need to be either a figure of 8 and rolling, twitching and stripping. One of the Argentinian guys, very good friend of mine, Alejandro Martello, he always used to say, Jim, I said, what's up, pal? There you go. Strip sexy, man. Strip sexy. So you'd want like some kind of input rather than just, or, you know. And one of the nice things about is you scale down the equipment from the great big thunder sticks is that you're more in touch with everything. You feel the rod in your hand. Everything, you got a scoop, haven't you?
I'll make a contract online.
Fantastic. Please shout out Jim Curry. You'll find me on the Guideline website. All right, great to see you. Thank you. Safe travels. So yeah, as you scale down, you just do get in touch with it. One thing I want to allay fears here before I forget. People say you cannot land big fish and you shouldn't be hooking them on big salmon on trout rods. This reel has fortunately caught some very large tarpon and some very large permit and some very large jungle species around the world, and it is the same one, and those things will pull a salmon backwards without any bother whatsoever. So these things have got drag systems on them, so use the drag system. The one thing I would say about fighting fish, just generally speaking, certainly on lighter gear, but on any gear arguably, is that it is not an effective way to fight a fish in this position, with the tip of the rod just going. Yeah. If you are fighting salmon on lighter gear, or you find any fish on any gear, for me, the rod wants to take. Could I ask you a favour? Could you grab the end of the fly line for me? Thank you very much. Very kind. So this, for me, having guided a lot over the last 30 odd years, is a great place to be to break a rod, especially as this fish gets closer and closer and closer to you, and the angle gets deeper and deeper and deeper. And there's this great way of dragging a hook out of a fish's mouth, is to actually try and lift it physically out of the water. So if you keep hold of that one more, a little bit more, thank you so much. So a lot of the time I am fighting fish from that angle. I'm going to throw them off balance. So if the fish is going that way, I can throw them off balance that way. If the fish is swimming that way, I'll throw them off balance that way. So I'm not pointing the rod right at it like I would if I was tarpon fishing pretty much, but I am putting a bend in, which is fighting using this part of the rod. The amount of people I've seen on 15-foot rods in Scotland with like a grilse on, and I get it because maybe not, that might be the first fish of the season that I understand, but at the same time, you know, one of my Eden brownies could knock you about if that's all the effort that's going into the bend of the rod there. The tip of the rod is for short casts, the middle of the rod is for longer casts, and the butt section of the rod is for fighting fish. That makes sense. So anybody tells you you shouldn't be fighting fish on a salmon on a single hander, they just, you know, they've probably got a reel which is better than they're certainly better than the brakes from my Hyundai, but probably more expensive as well. So, you know, don't be frightened of using it, but don't be worried about that position. Makes me nervous. In fact, let go, because that's making me nervous now. I feel like my evening's entertainment on the Eden might be coming to an end. So that's important. I will see you hopefully all on the river or in some exotic location. So if there's any questions, guys, please shout out, or come and see me after. But thank you for braving the cold and the wet, and I hope that's given you at least a bit of food for thought for trying something a bit different with your salmon fishing next year. Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening.